Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into an absolutely fascinating sermon by Pastor Elvis that unpacks a really profound biblical metaphor, the harvest. As you'll see, we're going to explore exactly how these ancient agricultural practices connect directly to some deep, deep spiritual truths.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We are going to journey all the way from literal Old Testament agriculture to the ultimate spiritual prophecy of the end times. So we'll start with the Festival of Harvest, recognize how the world is a field, uncover the idea of the first fruits, discuss the laborers of the harvest, and then wrap it all up with the end times harvest.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the Festival of Harvest.
To truly grasp this whole spiritual metaphor, we actually have to look at the literal historical context first. Over in Exodus 23, Moses commanded the Israelites to celebrate the Festival of Harvest. It was a spiritual law tying their very survival to thanking God. And this brilliantly illustrates the ancient agricultural laws and their step-by-step cycle. First, you've got the sowing of the seed. But then, and this is super important, there was a mandated period of waiting and resting. They literally had to rest on the seventh day, even during the most intense plowing and harvesting seasons. After that rest period, the first harvest was gathered up and presented directly to God as an offering. And finally, at the very end of the year, there was this great gathering where all the remaining crops were brought safely into the barn.
Moving right along to Section 2, the world is a field.
So this is where we transition from physical farming into the spiritual realm. Jesus basically took an everyday farming reality and flipped it on its head, teaching that humanity itself is the crop. He urged his followers, don't wait 4 months for the harvest. In physical farming, sure, you plant a seed and you've got to wait for it to grow. But spiritually, Jesus told them, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. He was explaining that the spiritual field, which is literally the entire world, is just packed with people, and it's ripe and ready right now. The time is already here.
Let's see how this builds into the really powerful metaphor of the sickle. How does a person actually get, harvested? First, just like a plant is cut from the earth, a person's roots have to be completely cut away from the world using a spiritual sickle. You are entirely detached from those worldly roots. Second, you're gathered up by spiritual laborers. And third, you are brought safely into the master's barn, which in this case represents God's kingdom.
Which brings us to Section 3, the first fruits.
In agriculture, the first fruit was the very first portion of the crop, dedicated as perfectly holy. But spiritually, it means something deeply personal. It's the first person in a family or a region or a group to actually accept the faith, paving the spiritual path for everyone else. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is I want you to reflect for a second. Who was the first fruit in your own family? The Apostle Paul even specifically mentions a man named Epaenetus, calling him the first fruit in Asia. Just one person opening the door for so many.
This practice has some seriously deep roots. In the ancient Levitical tradition, they would bring the first yield to the Lord and literally wave the offering to make it holy. It actually very much mirrors the raised hand worship you see in a lot of modern churches today. They'd also hold a holy assembly where absolutely no ordinary work was done. But most importantly, the sermon highlights that Jesus Christ himself is considered the ultimate first fruit. Through his resurrection, he became the very first of the entirely new creation.
All right, Section 4, laborers of the harvest.
Now, when we look at the sheer scale of the global population, the urgency here really escalates. We have a massive field, but a massive imbalance. As Luke 10:2 captures perfectly, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. There are millions of people waiting to hear the message, completely ready for harvest, but there's a tiny workforce actually doing the hard labor. There are very few, Paul-like or Peter-like laborers out there right now. The crop is overwhelming, but the workforce is tiny.
However, it's a highly collaborative effort. One sows, another reaps. Spiritual laborers often enter into the incredibly hard work that others have already started. You might be the one harvesting today, but someone else planted that exact seed years ago. It's a shared mission. And when the crop is finally brought in, everyone gets to rejoice together.
This leads us to our final part, Section 5, End Times Harvest.
This brings us to the prophetic climax of the explainer, the final cosmic separation of good and evil. So the crucial point is the stark contrast in Final Destinies, utilizing the motif of Jesus' winnowing fork. You have the wheat, representing the good crop, which is gathered safely into God's barn, his kingdom, versus the chaff, representing the ruined crop and the tares that were sown by the enemy in the night. This ruined crop is separated by the winnowing fork and burned in unquenchable fire. It's the ultimate permanent sorting.
Looking at the apocalyptic vision,
Drawn from Revelation and Matthew, we see that in the end, angels act as the final reapers, sent out with sickles. The earth's ruined, evil crop is described as being fully ripe for destruction. It's a vivid vision of a total, fiery separation of the righteous and the wicked. Once this happens, it is the absolute end of the age. The opportunity to be harvested safely is just gone forever.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to summarize everything we've explored today. In this great spiritual harvest, are you a laborer actively working the field, or are you in danger of being the ruined crop? It's a heavy question, but one that challenges us to deeply reflect on our own spiritual state within the context of this ancient, urgent metaphor. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep seeking understanding.